Hey guys, welcome back. So now if you guys don't mind, I would like to take a brief detour for us to go back and cover The Last of Us American Dreams 4-part miniseries. Because after watching the show on HBO yesterday, I was watching The Last of Us podcast with Troy Baker, Neil Druckmann, and Craig Mazin, and at one point they were talking about how after the game came out in 2013, they expanded the story in the comics, and in 2014 they put out a DLC. And with hearing this, I was like, I don't recall reading the comic, let alone knowing that the comic came out before the DLC. And for a minute this had me like, wait a minute, I gotta go back and check this out. So I went ahead and read all 4 issues, and I was just like, man, we gotta talk about this. Because for me, I'm one of the few who played The Last of Us Part 1, the remake, as my first introduction to The Last of Us on PS5. And I mean, I know I'm late, but as soon as I finished it, I was able to jump into Part 2 for like $10-$20. It was great. But for this one, we're getting a story written by Neil Druckmann and Faith Erin Hicks that goes back and tells a story that focuses on Ellie's school days, as well as her meeting a very special someone. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with how this begins, we start off with Ellie, who at this point had just turned 13 years old, in a world that is now 19 years after the fungal outbreak that had knocked out most of the world's population. So at this point, as we'll see, humanity, or really what's left of it, has changed drastically. And it's here we get our first taste of it in this series, where we find Ellie, who's in one of the last remaining quarantine zones, where because she's an orphan and at the age of 13, she has to transfer to a military prep school. And for Ellie, without her even saying a word, you can just tell by the look in her eyes that she does not want to be here. And for Ellie also at this point, she's a long way from being the tough girl that we know she's going to be one day. But even still at this point, she's far from an angel. But when Ellie gets here, we kind of get one of these moments where one of the soldiers who's dropping her off gives her a bit of a warning by telling Ellie that she can't do the things here that she did at her last school, as far as getting into multiple fights and trying to run away. And the soldier lets her know now that she's here, he won't be able to bail her out anymore. And for Ellie, she's more or less like, okay, whatever, I'll just go back with you. And she tells him that she can help, only for him then to tell Ellie that he can't because he has his own family that he needs to look after. And I mean, he might as well have told Ellie that he doesn't want to, because he mentions how they'd went over this a number of times, as if there may have been a way for him to be a quote-unquote legal custodian. But as much as Ellie wanted to stay, his answer was always no. But after this talk, Ellie, she's just like whatever, and she continues to make her way to the school while telling herself that she'll manage just fine on her own. But as soon as Ellie takes a few steps forward, she gets caught with a right hook and met by a group of older kids who are really just waiting for the new kids to step off the bus so that they could quickly establish their dominance on the new kids by beating them up and taking their stuff. But for Ellie, she puts up a fight for a little while until she gets hemmed up, but she still manages to talk that talk because she calls this bully fragile as well as a chicken because he won't fight her one-on-one. But when this bully goes for the next swing, his fist is then caught by a mysterious girl a few years older than Ellie, and she immediately pulls off a double baptism on both of these guys, handing out work like it's a temp agency. But even still, she serves them up well enough to get them to leave Ellie alone and hightail it out of there. But after this, the mystery girl, air quotes, she asks Ellie what those guys wanted. And it's here where she quickly finds out what it was when Ellie pulls out her Sony Walkman that she hid under her coat in hopes that those guys wouldn't see it. But at this point, with the mystery girl asking Ellie what she had hidden away, Ellie more or less brushes her off because she tries to tell Ellie a few words of advice by telling Ellie that she should have someone to watch her back since she's new here. But Ellie just cuts her off and tells her that nobody asked for your advice. And from there, the mystery girl just starts to go on about her way. But then she sees somebody coming and she gives Ellie another bit of advice, which is to run, to where then she takes off, bumping into Ellie and getting out of there. And it's here where we find that the person who was coming is the principal, who right away takes Ellie to his office for her to be reprimanded. And while they're here, he goes through a bunch of her history from her last school, with it showing that she'd been in fights, disobeyed orders, ran away, had more fights, stole stuff. And really for him, this is the first time that he's really taken notice to Ellie's previous misconduct. But with going through this, he gives Ellie a chance to explain herself, but she says nothing. But then he goes on to ask Ellie if she knows what stands between the hordes of infected and the stragglers that live in this city. So then her answer's like, no, the concrete wall. And when hearing that, he just goes off. But he tells Ellie the truth, and he lets her know that it's him and every other soldier who put their lives on the line just to keep the people here safe, because it's order that saves lives. And he lets Ellie know, like, if it weren't for them, the soldiers, every last person on the face of the earth would be infected, because these guys are the ones who risk it all to protect everyone, including the Fireflies, who are a renegade group who, unlike Fedra, the Fireflies want to find a way to get the world back how it was. But really, there's no definitive good side between the two of them, because they both got their hands dirty on numerous occasions. But with him reprimanding Ellie, he sends her to clean up this Fedra Jeep that is said to have been shot up by the Fireflies. But while she's cleaning it, she can't help but to repeat the words that she heard the mystery girl tell to that bully, as if in some way, subconsciously, Ellie aspired to be like her. But in the middle of her cleanup duty, Ellie decides that she wants to listen to her Walkman while she's working, but when she goes to her jacket and reaches for it in her pocket, she then discovers that it's gone. And right away, she knows who did it, but even still, she can't seem to wrap her head around how she stole it. But then it's here where we start to see for Ellie what happens when she doesn't have her Walkman. Because for starters, it goes beyond the fact that a portable music player is hard to come by in this world, but also for Ellie, that's how she escapes this reality at times. Because now, without her Walkman, she sees this finger on the side of the Jeep, and I mean also with the way that it's sitting there between two bullet holes, it does look kind of crazy. But this causes Ellie to trip out for a minute, because now she's imagining how that gory shootout had played out in vivid detail. And for Ellie, without her Walkman as a bit of distraction or an escape, with her seeing this, it freaks her out almost as if she was there. But from here we then head over to the commons area, back to the mystery girl, air quotes, where we find that Ellie's come to confront her. And right away, Ellie's just like, you got my Walkman, give it to me. And with a smirk, the girl's more or less like, what makes you think I'd take something from you? But Ellie looks her dead in the eye and assures her that she knows she took it, while also mentioning that she's a lousy thief. And right away, the girl just gives Ellie back the Walkman, but not without letting Ellie know that she thinks Ellie has a terrible taste for music. But then later that night, while most of the other kids at the school are asleep, Ellie's still up. And again, she's thinking about that girl and how she told those bullies off. But then when Ellie hears some steps coming from outside the door, she gets out of the bed, she quickly gets dressed, and she goes to check it out, only to then find that it's the same chick that took her Walkman. So Ellie sneaks up behind her and taps her on the shoulder, which scares the crap out of her. But with her starting to yell at Ellie, calling her a kid and telling her to go back to bed, Ellie just responds by telling her that she's gonna teach her how to sneak out of here. And at first the girl ain't trying to hear it, but Ellie lets her know that we could yell back and forth and get caught, or you could teach me how to sneak out, which is a lot quieter than the two of them standing there arguing loudly in a spot where somebody is likely to find them. And Ellie goes on to tell her, for one thing, stop calling her a kid, because she has a name. But with Ellie doing this, the girl thinks it's cute, and she asks Ellie if she can keep up, to where then Ellie's like, it's no issue. And with hearing this, the girl then says, don't make me regret this, Ellie. And right away, that right there just throws Ellie off, because at no point prior to this did she tell this girl her name. But with the girl quickly moving, Ellie has to follow and keep up, like she said. But with them finally making their way over the school fence, Ellie asks the girl how does she know her name, because at no point before did Ellie disclose that information. But the girl then tells Ellie that she has her ways, and also that she thinks Ellie looked crazy enough to be interesting. But it's here as they make their way over, where the mystery girl finally tells Ellie her name. And her name is Rowley, which I'm sure is no shock to some of you who have played every iteration of The Last of Us since the PlayStation 3. You found all the saves, you read all the notes, you know Joel's social security number, I get it. But if there's anybody out there, the handful of people who are like me, who ended up finding the comics later, and like myself, you were excited to see that this series brought something new to the story that you enjoyed, then at the end of the day, it was well worth the read. But I will say that some of my favorite parts of this miniseries are yet to come, because even though Rowley was mentioned a number of times in the first game, like 4 months after that came out, this comic dropped, and through the completion of this miniseries, it added so much more to Rowley, giving her an identity months before the release of the DLC. And with doing so, telling a story that wasn't just repeated in the DLC. So if you only play the game and you've only been watching the show, much like myself, you're definitely gonna learn something new here. With this being the story of how Ellie and Rowley met, as well as a look at some of the things that they've been through before the events that took place in the Left Behind DLC. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, Who wants more information on how to support the channel? I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.